Yo, 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 what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the House of Cinema. Hope you guys are having a great fucking day. I know I am. And we we've got easily what I would have said was my most anticipated film of 2022 early on back in January. But I guess you can say I'm feeling kind of gray on this film now. But before we get into the gray man, I got a great guest with me. You guys obviously know Amanda. What's going on?
Hi, I'm excited to talk about this because I have some thoughts about the Russos moving forward with their filmography. So this is going to be a good one.
No, yeah. So if you guys don't know, The Gray Man just came out, or technically it did, but technically it didn't at the same time. It's doing the same thing that Netflix usually does, where they pre-release it a week ahead of its Netflix debut. So it
Mm.
released last Friday in a select number of theaters, and it's premiering this Friday or tomorrow when you guys watch this on Netflix worldwide. But when the CIA's top asset, his identity known to no one, uncovers agency secrets, he triggers a global hunt by assassins set loose by his ex colleague. Now, I was reading that before we started recording, and I should have gotten my genuine reaction from that because it's not his colleague that or ex colleague that sends the hunt. But before we get into all that shenanigans, this movie had a lot of anticipation around it. It didn't really have trailers or not much was really known about this film up until like I would say 3, 4 months ago.
Mm.
And this film was announced maybe 2 years ago, maybe even three. I'm trying to remember if it was pre-pandemic or maybe even going to the into the pandemic because if you guys don't know, this is directed and produced by the Russo brothers, their producing company. I don't know if they pronounce it in the acronym form AGBO or if they actually say AGBO. I've heard it both ways.
Same.
So AGBO, AGBO, depending on how you guys want to say. This is not their first film. About a year ago on Apple TV Plus, about a few months after that streaming service premiered, they premiered Cherry on their website, and it's probably one of the most hated films on Twitter. Um, I'll sit back and relax and have my enjoyment with Tom's asshole in that movie, apparently,
No one
because
needed
that
that.
I mean the Russos really made a questionable choice with that decision. But you know what?
Yeah.
For what Cherry was worth, I enjoyed it, and I think everyone can assume that we all loved their MCU films. I think they knocked it out of the park with their four, and I was really interested to see what they were going to do, bringing back or going back to their action roots since Avengers Endgame. And I gotta say, I think that's where this movie really highlights because, while this kind of screams Winter Soldier type of action, I think the cast with Ana de Armas, Chris Evans, Ryan Gosling, Billy Bob Thornton, who I didn't even know was in this movie,
Same.
and r- I feel like I'm gonna mess up this guy's name so bad, but I feel like
Regime page.
yeah, Roger
Yeah.
Jean Page, which
Yeah.
honestly in this film really just felt like a casting due to his popularity in
Mm.
Bridgerton. I have not watched Bridgerton, but I can definitely tell you I don't want to watch it anymore or watch it even less because he out of all the actors, he was the one I just found to be the stereotypical mustache twirling villain who was really just I mean, I know you can just say that's generic, but he was so boring on the screen. At least you
Mm.
had Chris Evans, while he was literally a mustache twirling villain, you can just tell he had such a blast in this role. And the
Mhm.
chemistry between him and Ryan Gosling, I think, really worked the most. Well, Ryan Gosling really wasn't doing much. I think he really just embraced more of his drive character from that movie. And
Yeah.
for better or for worse, depending on how you guys want to look at this movie, but also Ana de Armas in this. I mean, how do you really go wrong with this cast?
I mean, they did because they underused half of them.
You think they really underused half of them?
I honestly, I would love to have like had more development with Ana de Armas because like she's such a big name now, and to have her in an action film, like she's so strong, and I think that yeah, she did go toe to toe with like Evans, and like she was with Ryan Gosling, she saved Ryan Gosling majority of the time, so I like seeing her fighting with them, but I still feel like there was no development. Like she was there fine, but a lot of these characters other than Ryan Gosling didn't really have any development by the end of this film, and I think that it was just like action 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 action, which is fine for an action movie, but you still have to have some form of story that like pushes it forward, and it's not the audience is waiting for the action to like push everything forward to save this movie, and I think that was the issue where these characters didn't really have much to do other than like kicking butt, which is fine, but what's the story here? Like it just got so messy halfway through, and we talked about this, that like you kind of like just push the story to the side and you're just waiting for the action to kind of end off the movie.
Now, well, I agree with a lot with what you said, but I'll give the movie the benefit of the doubt and say that they gave Armas the more of the action role respect that she deserved, that she
Mm.
didn't get in No Time to Die. And
Oh
they
boy.
totally, that was like a total middle finger. She was in every trailer.
Yeah.
And then she's literally in 5 minutes worth of the movie. And honestly, going into this, I was kind of prepared because I want to say my expectation for this film was to really see Evans and Gosling go head to head. And they do, but they really don't at the same time. And I think that might be at the expense of having so much uh Armas in this film because I think Chris Evans just eats up all the scenery, but he
Mm.
really doesn't do anything until that third act. He's really just
Yeah.
sitting behind a screen, commanding another team going after the Gray Man the entire film as he's
Yeah.
talking to Billy Bob Thornton's character, who I must say was in a totally different film. I don't know what Billy Bob was doing. I thought he was trying to be a better version of Bad Santa. Like he's gone through sobriety and all that, and he's just trying to be a better man because Billy Bob Thornton was in a totally different film. I gotta say the ending. I got. I guess spoilers. I'll put the thing up in the beginning because I'm so bad at remembering and saying it that I feel like the this movie has no emotion backing it, and I think they realized that as the film slowly went on. This movie's a hefty 2 hours and 6 minutes, and I must say you do feel that
Oh yeah.
2 hours and 6 minutes, unfortunately. And
Yeah.
as the movie progresses, they introduce a lot of plot in the beginning, and then it just slowly becomes action, 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 action.
That's it.
And well, I think it's really confusing because in the beginning of the movie, you get all the plot, but the action isn't very well edited, but I think the it changes at some point during the movie at like the halfway point where the action just becomes so much better and then the plots literally just become slim to none. And
Mm.
I sit back and I'm like, okay, now I see what you guys were trying to do with this movie. I think this is a movie for one of two people. People who just like action films and nothing more, and people who are diehard Russo brothers fans because
Yeah.
other than the action, there's really nothing much to this film. They try to add a lot of emotional back layering story between
Mm.
how Ryan Gosling's The Gray Man um, became a part of this super underground CIA operative and a lot of the political politics that they put in this movie just doesn't work and it falls flat on their head, and I think a
No.
lot of that just comes down to the writing and the acting of Jean Paul Jean you know what
Roger
I'm
Jean
sorry.
Page. I got you. It's
Jean
okay.
Page, yeah.
No, I get that. I think also for me, Ryan Gosling is such a fun actor to watch. And I go back to like watching him in Crazy Stupid Love and like The Nice Guys and La La Land, and he's just so freaking talented and has great comedic moments that when he plays a role that's so reserved and internalized, it's like they're not utilizing him to his full potential. And I think that he didn't really, like you said, right? Like he didn't really have much to do in this. And I was actually waiting for Chris Evans to come on screen to breathe some form of life into this movie. And then even that, like he didn't even have enough screen time. So for me with this, it's not so much like there's too much action. It's how they place the action and then how each action scene had to outdo the previous one if you're trying to build it into a grand finale. And even the grand finale, the only thing that made it feel like it was bigger than the rest of them was that it was like one on one, but it was just more graphic and longer. I'm like, that doesn't make a good action piece. And then they saved that towards the end. Like it felt really disjointed and messy, and they kind of didn't know where to place certain things in order to make sense of any of these characters moving forward or even to get to a conclusion really. So I just think that like the character of the gray man just wasn't strong enough to lead the film, and like that's not Gosling's fault because I cannot stand like him playing internalized characters. I can't, because that's why I hate First Man. That's why I can't stand Drive, for like those two reasons. Like I can't get on board with that because he's just such a good actor in everything else that he's done. So yeah, I just with the Gray Man, I couldn't deal with Gosling like that at all, and I think that's why I didn't really like it too much.
No, yeah, I absolutely agree. I think the thing with this movie is you hit it right on the head. Is they don't really have a they have a lead, but there's nothing to the lead of this film. They
Yeah.
try to give him this emotional arc between him, Billy Bob Thornton, and Billy Bob Thornton's daughter, where he's hired by Billy Bob to protect his daughter, and I think it was like Japan or China, and
Mm.
he protects her and saves her when someone tries to. I don't remember if they were trying to. I don't even think they say it. If the person was trying to come in to kill the daughter or just kill him. But
Yeah.
that kind of just seems like the movie where you don't really know too much of what's going on because this film really only gives you the bare minimum of the story it's trying to tell. Like I said, the gray man doesn't have much to it. It's really it literally tries to build a whole relationship between these three characters in the matter of one scene that takes place over 2 nights maybe,
Yeah.
and they want me to believe that he becomes this father figure that um, Billy Bob Thornton is entrusting his life with him and his daughter, and it's a lot of stuff that just kind of gets blown over because people are here for action. When you see Russo Brothers, you think of the bridge scene from Captain America. You think about the airport scene from Civil War. You think about those type of things, and I think that's the thing they realized, especially coming off of Cherry, because I
Mm.
feel like Cherry was a much different film from what they were ever used to because they were such action heavy directors. And I think I don't know if they got scared or if they took a step back after the backlash of Cherry, and maybe in the pre-production writing development process of this movie they kind of took back a lot of the story aspects and filled in more of it with action
Mm.
because maybe that's what people think they're more affiliated with. And it's kind of shocking because this is also not only written by the two brothers, but it's written by Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, who wrote the other four movies for them in the
Yeah.
MCU. So I don't really understand what went wrong in the aspect of this movie. I think they had all the pieces, they had the money, they had Netflix backing them, um, and I'm not gonna sit here and say that it's a great movie or it's an amazing movie, but I will say if you got nothing better to do, it, I mean, it's hard because this is going to sound like a very negative tense of words, but it's a very Netflix movie where Netflix just kind of throws
Yeah.
$200 million at the wall
Mm.
and hope it sticks. without
Yep.
really looking at the project and saying this needs to be changed. There needs to be more of this, less of this. I feel like there's a point where I think the MCU, Marvel's having the same problem where they're having too much creative freedom, and they're not having or finding that fine line in when
Mm.
they should step in and twiddle their toes, because I feel like within these past 4 or 5 years, studio interference and directors' visions have kind of clashed. And not even with just the Zack Snyder stuff, just in general. I feel
Yeah.
like it's been happening. And I think it's been a heavy conversation around Thor Love and Thunder. I'm pretty sure I talked about that a little bit on the last episode with Alex, is how much freedom is too much freedom. And
Mm.
I think you see the case in they look at them, or Netflix sees the Russo brothers as they made what is now the second highest grossing film of all time, and see
Yeah.
it as they can do anything. And I think that's a mindset that is not destroying films, but hurting films in a way where we're kind of just getting these slocky pieces of whatever. Same thing with Underground Six. I will say
Yeah.
the Adam Project earlier this year on
Yeah.
Netflix was kind of surprising, and I think this is where you can kind of see where Ryan Reynolds has gotten into more of that creativeness and creative liberty to know what works, what doesn't, what has to be where, what needs more, what needs less.
Mm.
And this kind of just feels like 2 hours of something that tries to be this political, I don't even want to say satire, or just political message on today's society in some
Mm.
sense. They try to bring in like this, we're trying to wipe out this old MI6 organization that Billy Bob Thornton's character started to build up, that the Gray Man is a part of. And I, I'm very curious. I'm like, did you guys just like watch Top Gun Maverick and be like, let's just throw this in? Like, no, but
Yeah. I know. I think for me, like, this is just a total rip off of like the Bourne trilogy. Like they just wanted to put everything together. Because while I was watching it, I'm like, this is very Bourne. Even with the action pieces, I was like, I've seen some like stuff like this before. But for me, going back to what you said about creative freedom, I think that we're going into something where there's no balance in actually wanting to tell a story and then also wanting to profit off of it. Like there's no balance between that anymore. So Netflix is clear for that because they're dropping all of this money and they're putting it into their stars and they're not really caring about what they're putting out there. They just want the big names to be on the poster and like to be on the trailers and all of that. And they don't really care about the story that they're putting out there anymore. And bigger studios are doing the exact same thing. And I think that's the main issue with all of these films is that they don't care about what they want to get audiences to get out of the film other than them spending $22 on a ticket to go see it in order to make the bank back and make a profit. And that's when you start losing like the value of cinema and why we even go to these movie theaters. So yeah, I think every studio is having this problem. I think they're just putting their money into their stars and they don't care. I feel like a lot of people don't care anymore and they just want to make bank and it's all about greed. And I think that's why we get these like B-level action movies that aren't going to be a Top Gun Maverick, because you could tell that even with Maverick, like they put so much love and care into that sequel, and that's what made everyone all over the world like fall in love with it. Like it's $1 billion movie, right? So I think that they're really just losing the reason why they make movies in the first place, and that's really heartbreaking.
no, I agree. Something I wish they touched a little bit more on when it comes to the Gray Man is I wish they show. I know he's supposed to be super hidden, covert. You're not
Mm,
supposed to know much about him, but they did try to dig into his past at some point, and I
yeah,
wish that they dabbled more into him becoming this lethal man that everyone's so scared of. I
yeah.
get why when you watch the action scenes, but I think there was a good set piece. I was telling you about it is when he's locked up in the middle of, I think it was like a water fountain on a park bench by the
Yeah, yeah,
police,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
then there's this big shootout that starts happening. I think they did a really good job at showing his ingenuity and how he stays under pressure. He stays concentrated under the pressure and gets out of the situation while
Yeah.
still completing his mission at the same time. You don't really get too much of that. You don't really get it to the end, like I want to say. That's when they
You
really
don't.
start to dig in a lot of these action beats and
Yeah.
pieces. But Chris Evans, how did you think he did in this movie?
Oh, I loved him. I think it's crazy to me, and I was telling you this, that like he was able to pull off a mustache. He pulled it off, and I love him with like a full beard, and he looks great. He doesn't look too great clean shaven, but then when you put the mustache on, and then he acted like a villain, and it was like a fun villain. Like it wasn't like a complete bad villain, like a badass villain. He was still campy and fun, and had like his own little I want to say catchphrases, but he has his own little like commentary. And he was just fun to watch. And it's just funny because like you see him as Steve Rogers, you see him as this like clean cut guy. I'm not saying that you didn't watch anything else with him in it, but like you just see him and know him and find comfort in knowing that he's Steve Rogers, that he's Captain America. That when he turns into like, the character in Knives Out, or he turns into like the villain here in The Gray Man, it's always fun to watch him play around with that stuff. But like I said before, I think that he was the MVP of this film. I didn't really care about what was happening with Ryan Gosling because he fell flat. I didn't care about like Ana de Armas, no offense to her. I love her, but again, like her character fell flat. So the only one that wasn't like one note was Chris Evans. And I was like, thank God, give me more scenes of him. But at the same time, like we said, he was underused. And you can't underuse your villain. You can't underuse Evans, who's like now an A-list star. You can't like do Gosling, who's an A-list star, dirty like that. And then only have them have banter from like a distance halfway through the movie, and then have a close hand-to-hand combat finale in the way that they did, without them actually sharing scenes or sharing that like level of banter that you would want to see between a villain and a lead, and they didn't have that. So it's just, for me, I feel like they needed to focus more on like maybe one or two characters, because there were so many people in here that it just got so messy, and I didn't know what the hell was happening halfway through. I didn't know these characters names, and people were being introduced, like it was just all over the place. So if I think that if they kept it to like the big three, if they kept it Gosling, Evans, De Armas, and played around with that synergy, I think this would have been a cleaner movie for them, and not me waiting to see when Chris Evans was going to come on screen and kind of like, hey, I'm going to save this movie, which he kind of did for the most part. But like, I shouldn't be waiting for your villain to appear to make me want to keep watching this movie. So like I think that's the downfall, but also God bless Chris Evans at the same time, or else like I wouldn't have enjoyed watching it for the most part.
No, I think it kind of runs into a problem that I've been having. It seems throughout 2022's movie season,
Mm,
where they have this great actor, someone who isn't really well known to be a villain, like Gore the God Butcher with Christian Bale, with Ethan Hawke in The Black Phone as the
yeah,
grabber, where you have these non-known actors of being a bad guy, but
mm,
they play the role so well, but you always feel like they're not allowed to fully be the villain they want to be.
yeah,
And I think you really get that in this movie as well, because I think Evans is just vivacious in this movie, and he really just chews up the scenery even when he's doing nothing. Just his
mm,
witty banter back and forth on the phone with not even Ryan Gosling but the rest of the characters. It's just like, wow, Chris Evans is just here to have a good time. He realizes that he's just talking on a phone and really isn't going to have too much action up until maybe the last 35 minutes. But
yeah,
I think Chris Evans does a lot with this small role. And if only they allowed him to be the main perpetrator of the film and going out and actually hunting Ryan Gosling himself, I think there could have been a great
mm,
little back and forth between the two of them, going back and forth each other of just neither of them winning. They just always get into a stalemate somehow, and
Mm,
that's how their rivalry begins. Because I think him as a villain is really fun. I think there's a lot to this character that could have been put in this film, but like I said, I think they really just stopped focusing on the plot at some point. I mean,
mm,
even the villain doesn't really get resolved by the end. Nothing really happens of any mass. They just put all the blame on Chris Evans' dead dead character at that point,
naturally.
which is fine, but it's whatever. Jean Regine, Amanda, help me.
Roger Jean Page. Got you.
Regine J Page. I'm so
You'll
sorry.
get it
I'm having
eventually.
a hard
It's
time with
fine.
this, but I want to bring up something I find really interesting too, along with
Mm,
another trend I've been seeing in 2022. So this movie hasn't opened up on Netflix, like I said before, but it's been in the theaters and it's got over 100 reviews on the Tomato Meter critic section and over 100 on the audience score. And the, the critics are at 53% with 110 reviews and an 88% with audience score with 100 plus reviews. And I just got to say, do you think the critics are right, or do you think the fans or audiences are right on this one? Because I think within 2022, that's a really big trend we've been seeing where critics and audiences have kind of been super divided on a lot of movies
clashing.
separate from comic book films. So
Mm,
I just find it really interesting that we're kind of going down this whirlpool of just separating what's a good film to people, what is a good film to people. And maybe it's a question I'm going to start asking on this show, but might as well ask
yeah.
it. Do you think the critics got it right on this one, or do you think the audience score is more correct?
Oh man. I think the critics got it right on this one. Again, like we're here, we watch a million and one action films. We watch like thousands of movies like every single year. And it's the fact that like you have to learn what you like. It's kind of like your own set of guidelines when you're watching something. And we're all critics at the end of the day. But for action junkies, for the general audience who don't really care about, you know, nitpicking and looking at certain things that could have been fixed and don't have that eye. Like a lot of people who have the eye to criticize films, completely different than a general audience member who's watching this. So if they see action 24/7, they see Captain America, they see Ryan Gosling, they see like the gorgeous Anna de Armas, like these are like big stars that they know. So they're just going to like it no matter what cuz it's a dumbass action movie. But for us in this case, like we're watching it. I do think that the critics got it right because for me, I gave it like a 2.5 or something out of 5 like that for my own personal review. And like I was almost falling asleep while watching it because there's like the plot was getting messy and I need a story to like stay engaged. Like the action is just not going to do anything for me if it's not meaningful to like what's happening in the story. So I feel like that was lacking. But this is a good question to ask, Rye, honestly, on all of the other shows because it's really smart. But yeah, in this case, we have that critical eye. It's completely different than the general audience, and that's why everything's been so divisive. And it's going to continue to be divisive, which I'm nervous about. But yeah,
No, yeah, honestly, I agree. I think this movie is going to cater to a specific audience,
yeah,
which is good in its own right. But I feel like a lot of days or a lot of people nowadays are just like, I'm a critic and everything has to be perfect in every single sense.
yeah,
And you know what? That's fine if you go into a movie looking like that. But I think this movie does have a lot of good things to it. I think as the action gets better over time throughout the film, you get a lot more invested. I think they do a good job at setting up the intuitiveness of the gray man. I do like the relationship that they try to form between the gray man and Chris Evans' character. But like I said,
mm,
because they kind of limit Evans' character a little bit, you don't fully get that back and forth banter, especially face to
yeah,
face, that you truly wanted. I think they tried a little too hard with getting Ana de Armas to be this overly badass yet funny female character. Um, she's a badass in general. I think anything
Yeah.
she does, you don't need to make her funny. Just make her a badass. And I
Mm,
think that's just a lot of forced humor that, like Bobby Thornton, or
you got it.
I'm just awful with names today.
You're
Billy
good.
Bob Thornton, just don't mind me, people. Just felt like he was in a different movie because of how comedic he treated his role. And Ana de Armas kind of plays it both ways. She's either pushing a joke out or she's like, I'm gonna kill this motherfucker. So a lot of things in this movie had me scratching my head. But if you're looking for a good, not, I don't want to say great, but a good 2 hour action film, it's a rainy day, you got nothing else to do. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not wasting money. Fucking turn it on. I think a good recommend in that case. But Amanda, would you recommend this movie to people, especially with it being on Netflix? And what would you grade it?
Oh, 100%. Watch it just for Chris Evans and his mustache. Like, just watch it for him being absolutely wild in this movie. Ryan said he's like so fun. And he's the best part of this movie. I also want to give a shout out to my girl, Julia Butters. I thought she was really great as Billy Bob Thornton's daughter. She also had like nothing to do in this movie other than cry, which pissed me off because she was so great in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So I just want her to get better roles. But yeah, put it on just for Evans, not for Ryan Gosling as much as I love him. I think that Evans really will surprise a lot of people in this, and I think he deserves the recognition for being someone other than Captain America for the rest of his career, because he's a really strong actor, and he grew into a strong actor. So yeah, as I said before, 2 out of 5 would be, I guess, 6 out of 5, 6.5 out of 10. Yeah, 6 out of 10 that I'd kind of
Yeah.
give it. It's it's good. There's action. I think the Russo brothers have kind of lost their touch, to be honest. Like in regards to the action department, and like I told you before, the sound design was like stellar. Like you could hear those bone crunches, those punches, everything. You could hear it, and it was great. um, but I think that it's just not as polished as their other action sequences. I think that the editing was a bit messy at times, and it was kind of like hard to see what was happening and like who was fighting at times. There were some great set pieces, but I think that it's just getting a little bit messy because they tried to overdo it. But yeah, 6.5 out of 10 for me for the Gray Man.
Yeah, I think there's a lot left to be desired when it comes to a lot of the aspects in this film. It has a
Mm,
lot of lows, but I think it does reach some decently high highs by the end of the
yeah,
film. It's not made for everybody, but when I said this before, but I hate to say this is such a Netflix film. So I think just by saying that, a Netflix action film, I think that could be just enough to let a person know exactly what they're trying to get themselves into. But
yeah,
I'll be honest, if I had to choose this over like Underground Six, I'd probably see this again or
same.
watch this again. So depending on how you guys felt about Underground Six,
Yeah,
take that as you please. And thank you so much for joining me, Amanda. We do shows literally every single fucking week, but it's
yeah,
great that we got to sit down and talk about the Gray Man a little bit early. So, I mean, this was one of my most anticipated films, and
yeah.
it's kind of bothering to see it lackluster in that aspect. But thank
I
you so much
know.
for coming on.
Yeah, it
And
was
where
so
can we find
fun.
you?
Yeah, well, thanks, Rye. You're always great. You can always follow me over at AMX NDA Reviews on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. You can check out my website, candidxcinema.com, and my YouTube, Candid Cinema. I'll have this and probably my Nope review soon times this weekend. Yeah.
No, yeah, and guys, you guys already know where to check out the podcast at the Suit Up Geeks channel. So, guys, don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe down below. We've got a lot of great content coming in the next week or two. So stay tuned for that. Next week's episode will be our Nope episode with Christian Sinaleodon from Film Optics. So I can't wait for that one. We're gonna have a great conversation. Can't wait to see another Jordan Peele film. But thank you guys so much for checking out the House of Cinema. And without a doubt, see you at the next showing.